Okay, so while we wait for everyone to join us, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements, basically for housekeeping. Like I mentioned earlier, Zoom is our primary platform, so please join us on Zoom. In case you have any comments or questions throughout the conversation, feel free to send them to us in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I will keep reading them and I will try to pick up relevant topics as and when we proceed. The ones that we cannot take during the conversation, we will try to pick up more questions at the end of our talk. I do apologize in advance. We get a lot of comments, we get a lot of questions, but we are not always able to incorporate everything within the time frame that we have on hand. So we will try to get back to you, or we'll try to connect Sanjib to you, or you with Sanjib later. Even after the talk, feel free to send us your comments and questions. You can find me on Instagram at Ghadiok. You can get in touch with the Matra handle, which is matra_architects. You can also email us. You'll find all our coordinates on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere that we are. So feel free to connect with us. During the conversation, everyone's going to be kept on mute. Today, we've got Viren and myself. I'm Mrinalini. I'm an architect, a researcher, and a writer. Viren is an architect, the principal and founder of Matra Architects, and together we co-curate the Unplugged Talks. And we are joined by a very special friend, Sanjib Chatterjee, who is the founder of KAARU, who has been a friend for many, many years. And we've had multiple conversations over the last few years and finally been able to hopefully culminate some of those thoughts into a chat today. This is going to be interesting. It's also going to be a little different. It's going to be very explorative. And I would request Viren to be a little more active today. And so he's going to be a part of this as well, more actively. And so before we start, I want to first thank Sanjib for taking our time on this beautiful Saturday afternoon while we're all locked up at home. And even though we're all in the same city, we are in different spaces. But thank you, Sanjib, for being here with us.
Thank you.
I am going to begin by first introducing you, even though we have a lot of people over here who would already know you and know your work. But for the benefit of those who are not very familiar about your journey, as an architect by training, Sanjib graduated from the School of Architecture and Planning in Delhi, after which he honed his skills and design vision, initially by training in fine art, and then working with architect and urban designer Professor K.T. Ravindran for several years. Traversing the boundaries of space and form for the last 3 decades, he has manifested through his work an underlying logic of interdependence between architecture, interiors, fine arts, installation design, and traditional Indian arts and crafts. And we are hoping to explore some of these aspects with him today. 20 years ago, Sanjib co-founded KAARU with Anjalee Wakankar. KAARU is a design studio based in Delhi, which centers itself around the purposes of strengthening a certain sense of belonging to the land in the realm of Indian contemporary design. Their work is directed by amalgamating philosophical insights and creative processes innate in the Indian arts and crafts with ideas and procedures derived from the modern ethos of technology. One can find KAARU's work across India, Japan, as well as the UK. Besides some very interesting architecture and design, you can also find articles authored by Sanjib in various design magazines and journals, one of which was actually written on my request for Mondo Arc India a few years ago, which I'm also hoping to refer to in today's conversation and has been a little bit of a takeoff point for the many chats that we've been having. So Sanjib, welcome. And to kick off today, I want to I want to bring our focus on the idea of the title of our talk. And that's something, interestingly, has been suggested by you yourself and is intriguing. And I would like for you to kind of give some sort of context to our audience. I know that we will sort of unfold various ideas through the conversation, but I think it would be interesting to sort of give the audience some context to why we have titled this talk today, Changing Without Changing.
Yes. Thank you so much. It has been going on for some time between you, me, and Viren about being part of this conversation.
Yes.
And I must say that I was delighted to see the earlier programs, which got me really intrigued and interested. And honestly, I couldn't hear all the details, but most of them, uh, whatever you're recording and the conversations that are happening are really delightful. So thank you for making me part of that whole series. And I'm going to just mention quickly the reasons finally for me to take this decision is that it's a program or a conversation piece without an agenda. Mm-hmm. So that that got me really interested, because when you don't have an agenda, you tend to open up. So I'm going to take the leap of faith, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to bring in a couple of things which is not really directly connected to our work, though I'll be mentioning one of our projects later. But it's to give a perspective, and you very beautifully defined in 2 words as the overall truth, the overarching truth that one needs to know while one is practicing or living or just during daily life. So things connected to that. So that's part 1. And secondly, there have been some incredible resonances from what I heard from the Unplugged Talks. So that also has been the reason for me to take this leap of faith. The speakers who have been there, and the resonances also come from 2 contemporary thinkers who I'll be mentioning today, what they say in very short form. And of course, our Indian tradition, the Indian philosophy, the ethos of all the ideas and thoughts which have been there for thousands of years. So what I've learned from my teachers, what I've imbibed, is what I'm going to hand over, pass on. It's nothing is new, nothing is original. It's just handing over through a conversation which doesn't have an agenda. And the third, and there is your 3 combination, the Trinity, which is the timing of the program. I think the timing is impeccable, because the turn of the moment, or so to speak, the historically speaking, the way we are with all the confusions we are going through right now, to place a program at this stage through a conversation, I think that was very crucial for me. So these 3 reasons, and let me begin with the resonances which I found from the Unplugged Talks. And I'm going to peg myself, or rather peg the conversation on the points, because I had to be very, very selective, otherwise it will take days. And of course, people will go to sleep. So I have picked up a few points from Mr. Ganju's talk. Though there have been resonances from what Amrish was saying, what other people have been saying, but I think what he mentioned is something that resonated in a really overall sense, which affects us all. I'm just going to quickly read out. He mentioned, is there a timeless way of building? Starting from prime. The quality of something that says it has always been there. Quintessential architectural experience. And these are all related to not just architecture or design or things to do with aesthetics. It is related to daily life as well, which I'm going to discuss briefly soon. Architecture has to go beyond appearances and construction. This one particularly is directly connected to what I'm going to talk today. Then he gave an example when you asked him about a favorite building, he gave an example of an ashram, if I remember. He said that it's a shelter which is gentle in its spirit. That was striking. In this day and age, a person of his experience to have summed it up as one building where he found that this is the quality that he appreciates the most, or one of the best qualities. Then this is a big one as well, the importance of familiarity. Then there is stability due to mother's love. That's how also the word mother got triggered off in my head. I was thinking about it, the three words which I'm going to introduce. And then another very interesting thing he mentioned is Indian students with higher level of consciousness in a different milieu. Now, these are all connected, and I will come to how it is connected. I've added a few of my own, which is unhurried architecture and design that connects the outer to the inner. Because when I'm expressing, I imbibe from my environment and then I process it inside and then I express it again. But how true is that process? How well do I understand that? Then there is developing a view. That's very, very important. In Indian tradition, we have something called Saundarya Drishti. Now, this is nothing to do with aesthetics in particular, but it's a view. And this aesthetic view holds a very crucial part of how to approach design. And lastly, I'll also mention later what I call as architecture of horizons. What does this mean? I'll come to that. Then talking about the timing part of it, why that's important. Most of us would be familiar with the book An Era of Darkness by Shashi Tharoor. I think he brilliantly sums up the inflictions that we had to go through. And as human beings, as the land, as a culture, as a civilization, for almost 200 years, the wounds are there. So what I feel is now the approach to design, what personally speaking, the overall approach, an overarching approach would be an approach of healing. So anything that helps that, and that would include also knowing where one stands, where one is, the land, the people, the philosophies, because unless you're a good medic, you won't be able to heal, and that needs hard work. So one has to know. But more than healing, I don't think things would work out because one has to make things whole first. There are lots of wounds inflicted, including the way we look at things, the way we constantly look over our shoulder somewhere else. Those are wounds. So that's what I called as an approach of healing. So it's regaining a sense of aesthetic in that sense. So these are the reasons and the content which will be there in the conversation. So I'm going to start from the timing part of it. That why do I say that this timing is very, very crucial? Because we are going through, for most of us, a time of fragility. And it's extreme fragility where one can feel it. It's one thing to know it intellectually, and it's completely other to have it on you in a very physical sense. And the sense of impermanence that is there, that we keep talking of, but suddenly, you know, there is the ground moves under your feet. And this particular quality called impermanence is also something that I'm going to talk of. The the time of uncertainty and anxiety about present and future. Now, all these things are connected by the thread of change. That's the connecting thread. But change, we are very, very familiar with. We are, in fact, in love with change. And the paradox is that as designers, we constantly hanker and pine for change. It's something that we look forward to. But at the same time, if it becomes extreme, then we don't know how to handle it. So there is one paradox in that sense. The other is that though there is always a pining for change, there is an excitement for change, there is also a fear that we are going to miss out. It's in the modern world, we are constantly in this fear of having missed out on this revolution, that innovation, and I'm not the first one who's talking about it, but at the same time, this is the resonance that I found from two contemporary thinkers from the West, where our own philosophers and thinkers have been talking about it, that change is something that we hanker for, we pine for, but the way to peg oneself if one wants to be at peace is to understand what it really means. So when we don't understand, we unwittingly, what we try and do is we try to look for something that is enduring, that is permanent, that is that for us is not changing all the time. So we, on the other hand, secretly, inwardly, we're constantly pining for that. And in architecture, in design, we tend to do that. There are changes that we want to bring in, but at the same time, we want to work with things that won't change.
Because we find comfort in something that's constant, right? When something is happening a certain way, we become comfortable with it. We come to terms with it. And therefore we don't want to change it, but we want change because we're also, as a species, we get bored and we want that excitement.
Yes.
People say, right, change is the only constant.
The problem is you also get bored by being bored. That's a big problem. So where does it end? It's never ending. So what happens is that you're constantly anxious. And what we are discussing in this Unplugged event is that I'm also trying to address the young minds who would hopefully be hearing this at some point of time, that there is absolutely no reason to be anxious about what your neighbor is doing or somebody else in some other country is doing. And there is a reason for that. And I'm coming to that. You're absolutely right that we want to hold on to things that we intuitively sense is stable. The one of the big challenges is that in modern times, change is epitomized by technology. And the problem is that nothing sticks. So you take any isms in the world, there have been brilliant theories about design and architecture. I personally find that nothing sticks at the end of the day. Why? Because it's something that you can't hold on to. There is actually nothing to hold on to. Ultimately it's a theory which we can also develop, and that's the whole point. How to do that? How to not get completely entangled by the fear of missing out, and yet hold on to something that you figure out as stable. So it's a gradual process, and it's going to take time. I'm going to, the reason I earlier said that I mentioned two contemporary thinkers is that the whole, this combination of change and technology, it is been epitomized in the West. It's been glorified, and it has become synonymous with originality, with modern technology, with rapidity. So these are all the synonyms which have come together. And world over, not just as Indians, world over, we as designers, as people, we have fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. And this is where I want to bring in the first contemporary thinker. Most of us are familiar with him. It's Alain de Botton. So what Alain says is that we have unwittingly allowed ourselves to be swallowed and intimidated by the narrative of technology, with its endless cycles of change and revolutions and improvements. Now, this is a very important line, with endless cycles of change. That's where this whole thing of innovation comes in. He says this is false. I find this a very, very bold statement. And I also find this absolutely true, because I've never been comfortable with this whole thing of constant innovation. Why? Because ultimately, it's not that it's not brilliant, because we are also, as KAARU or as a person, I'm constantly using technology. I have an iPhone. I want to keep up with everybody else. But at the end of the day, that's not my source of information or contemplation or introspection. These are tools which should not become an end.
But technology doesn't have to become an end, right? Like you just said yourself, technology is a tool, and it could be used as a tool. And technology today, unfortunately, a lot of people feel that technology equals innovation, or the other way around, that innovation equals technology. But again, that's not the case.
Yes, so we will discuss innovation also. See, the problem is that can you repeat what you just said?
I was saying that technology doesn't necessarily equal innovation, or the other way around, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that in order to innovate, we have to use technology. But you don't have to. Technology is one of many tools that are available to us.
That's right. But the problem is the narrative constantly bombards you through media that this is how it has become synonymous. So even though you don't want, that's what Alain is saying, that unwittingly we have been intimidated by that. And for the young minds, it's not easy to get out of it. You are able to say that because you have been able to move back. That's not so easy for the young minds to do that. You have to go through the grind of introspection. Then you realize, because for most people, that is what being ahead is. He further urges to tap into the cycles of psychology, which is enduring and absolutely up to date. Now, depending on where you are, we all have our treasures. And it's high time in India we start doing that. He refers to the Greek philosophers, which is absolutely fantastic. The whole lineage of the philosophers who have been there, who also affected our thinking, and in an excellent way. So do we have our own lineage of thinkers. So when are we going to tap into that? And that is where also, I think, where education is happening or design is happening, one has enough potential to look into. It's the point that one is trying to make here is that that it's not outside that the answer lies. That's what we are made to believe, that answers are somewhere else. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that the answer is always, for any problem, any situation, the answer is always ultimately within. Now, how to tap that, and what is the reason that one should do that? The reason is simply that whatever I tap from outside, it changes after some time. So there goes all my moorings, and there's nothing to hold on to. But if I tap into my own nature, then I'm really, really tapping into something that is not only substantial, that is also something that holds, that endures. And that's the point. What he also says is that, and I'm mentioning this because he's somebody who comes from the West, and that's where this whole thing of this whole narrative has been churned out, that our data source, our research tool, and this comes from somebody like him, is the self. He says better than MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, etc. Why? Because we rarely have a conversation with ourselves. This is the key, how to have a conversation with ourselves. For that, you need to really calm down, quieten down. And that's not going to happen overnight. Sorry.
So at this point, yes, Sanjeev, I we're talking about a lot of references, and it's rather intriguing. I think it would be important for us to break it down a little bit for our audience as well. But I do want to ask over here, given that we are talking about time, we're talking about change. If one is to say that they have changed, and if that the minute you say that I have changed, it's an acknowledgement right away of a state of being that I was in, and now it's a different state of being that I am in, right, currently. So there's been that change. There has to have been that evolution in order for it to be a change, which also means that there has been a time lapse. A certain period of time has lapsed in order for that change to be evident. I'm curious as to what your change has been and what your journey has been in order for you to realize your changes.
It's very simple. The major change has been to be pointed out that one has to start looking inwards. And this has happened on its own due to the circumstances and 10 years back. So it was not that this was planned, but many things happened because of which there was a crisis, and then one started to look inwards. But then, just looking inwards is not enough. One has to know the method. And this is what I'm going to gently bring in, how to look at the world, the way we look at the outer. And what is the difference between that and looking inwards? So that has been the big change. And coming to what you had mentioned earlier, changing without changing, I'll keep repeating this, is exactly this thing that what doesn't change is the external factors. You have no control over them. Tell me, I have a body, it's constantly changing. Other people are changing. The environment is changing. So I have no control over that. But in my thoughts, the way I perceive it can be controlled. And that's the way one perceives, that can be changed.
But don't you think that your inner thoughts are also a response to your external stimuli? So what is happening around you and what is changing around you is also in some way driving what you think internally.
Yes. So the whole process is to, what we were discussing earlier, is to start gradually, one by one, identify and then take out these thoughts from constantly bombarding your mind. Because at the end of the day, if you really sum up and really squeeze all the thoughts together, you will find that just a few have been really meaningful. The rest have been just either echoes or completely unnecessary. And most of the time, we are not even aware of those thoughts. So yes, absolutely, they reflect what we are going through, what is happening outside. Absolutely. And when there is a summing up of these thoughts, or even if you're aware, meditation is all about that. You sum up that what is going on, and you find that these are just thoughts. They have no meaning at all and completely unnecessary, what is called as the monkey mind. So there you are. It reflects the outside, which is constantly changing, where we really don't have any control, like the thoughts are reflected inside. So the whole idea is to start quietening down. And that's where the hold onto yourself begins. And this is how Allah says that he uses two words, which I found was very effective, especially for the young minds who are constantly looking for change and innovation. And I completely, I agree with it, or rather it resonates with me. He says that how do we future-proof ourselves? Because this whole thing about constantly trying to be futuristic, and how do we future-proof ourselves? And what happens if we are not futuristic? Look at the situation we are in today. And that's why I mentioned the timing of the program. What have we come to? We have no control over the environment we are in. So what kind of future do we have? What was the future that we were planning? And I'm also responsible for that. So how do we prove ourselves? There's a beautiful anecdote here. I'm going to mention it very shortly, is that if you want to, this was a conversation between a teacher and a student. The student was completely boggled by the fact that, the whole ground ahead of him was very rough. So how is going to walk? His bare feet would get completely damaged. So the teacher said that, well, you have two options. One is to cover the ground completely with soft material, or you cover your feet. So it's the covering of the feet by which we future-proof ourselves, which is the inner self. And when we tap into our own nature, we find that there is a whole plethora of knowledge, philosophy, ideas that we get connected to, because people have, what are these philosophies, by the way, whether it's Greeks or Indian or anywhere in the world? What are these philosophies anywhere in the world? These are introspections. And how have they happened? Because people have tapped into their inner selves. That's how these philosophies have become.
But I have to say here, Sanjib, that one could argue that you're talking about future proofing, you're talking about being in the moment, and I would assume also being mindful about what you're doing currently, right? But when you're talking about future proofing, isn't that sort of like, another school of thought could be that you need to prepare for the future. If you don't think of what is to come, how do you prepare for it? The fact that we are in the situation that we are in, the way the environment is, and all of us have contributed to it, is because we haven't cared enough about what it's going to be like and have only catered to our current needs. So wouldn't you think that that would be a counterpoint to what you're saying?
Yes. Well, the way things were designed earlier, I'll give you an example. We used to have, it's good that you mentioned that, we had this unit called a village, gram. And I can only mention things that I have experienced here, that I've learned about here. The word gram comes from griha. Griha is shelter. Yes. And the word griha emanates from garbha. So you see, the way communities, a living place, a location was designed was to look at it as a body. So if it functions like a body where one organ takes care of the other, that's how things were designed. And there is another word called dehat. It comes from the word deh, body, again. These are very, very important words. And this is how the epistemology or, the concepts used to be created, because there are a lot of thought which was put into it. So coming to your question that, should we prepare for the future? This is how you prepare for the future, where you have a holistic view and not as parts. Because if you keep looking at things as parts, then you will also be planning for parts. One thing will not connect with the other. One part will not know how to take care of the other part. So, so there you are. We have lost touch with, how people depend on each other and how each part is important. And that's where the problem is. We have an environment of alienation, complete alienation. We are living as units. So if there is alienation between two units, even the shelters that we design are meant to alienate people. How will this happen? How this holistic coming together of environments will happen? And that is why you have what we have today. So I hope it answers some part of your question.
Yes, it does. In fact, I was going to bring this up a little later in our conversation about this whole idea of, yourself and your journey, whether it's been a kit of parts or whether it's been something that you feel has been this larger truth that can then further be deconstructed or fragmentized into smaller units. We have
Yes.
talked about this initially. And this was, I think, also mentioned during the Mondo article, which was talking about what architecture really is and what is the difference between architecture and design, and whether one kind of responds to the other, or one can be conceived as a part of the other, or whether one becomes a unit of the other. So in fact, I'm going to ask our team, Siddhant or Ankit, to share a link of that article with our audience maybe a little later, so that they can also read the article if they're interested in it. It might give them some context to what we're talking about. But tell me, Sanjib, when we're talking about all of this, can you give us some sort of illustrations from your own personal journey in terms of what you have experienced and how you have sort of discovered these truths for yourself, and how, in fact, that has influenced your own work personally, professionally, your sort of, how would you map your journey with these experiences?
That is going to happen with one of the projects that we did, which you are aware of. Mm-hmm. There have been other examples, but this particular project is very, very important for us. If you want, I can discuss it now. Sure. But I would like to mention the other person before I go into this.
Of course. Yes.
Read from this article to make some sense that why we approach the project. And not just the project, the whole way of thinking has changed because of this. What I was earlier talking of, the view, the aesthetic view, that has changed completely. So the other person, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the other person is, which you and I have already discussed, is Charles and Ray Eames. Mm-hmm. And why I mention this again is not just he represents a culture which has given so much importance to technology, but his voice says that look at yourself and look at the outer world. And these two films which he made, The Powers of 10, I found it incredible. And this is so telling that the way things are built. And that's where our philosophers, our masters, our teachers have been not only saying, they've been discussing these philosophies for so many hundreds of years. So basically, in the film, the camera goes inside the body, it's exploring the body, and it layer by layer, it's going in, and it keeps finding tinier parts, moving out, increasingly tinier body parts. And the other way, he has looked at the outer universe. So there you find the deeper mega fragments in the outer world. And the amazing thing is that both ways, what he finds in the film is that there is only vast space. Now, this is where we should take a moment and really contemplate, what does that mean? If this is vast space both ways, that means anywhere in the world, any human being or any environment, if you delve deeper and deeper and analyze, you find space. There are more details to it. This is not the time to discuss it. But if that is so, then culturally, the way I am positioned, I can start new anytime. But do I think about doing that? Because my focus is always on the parts, not what it's leading to, which is ultimately space. So essentially, what it is saying is that this is one view, that whatever you do, it's a play of space and the content is space. There are fragments, but if you even go into the fragments, there is only vast space. So let's keep it at that for the moment and then move on to the next one. So there is space, and then why don't I see this all the time? Like if I'm having a cup of tea, or I'm looking at a tree, watching a movie, why don't I see that? It's because our senses have a certain distance between what we are seeing, the fragments, and the sense. And this distance maintains this delusion. So basically, if I'm a microscope, I'll be able to go slightly inside, slightly more inside a normal microscope. But if I become, instead of a human being, an electron microscope, I'll go even further deeper. That's how the film goes into a human body, or large telescopes. So if my body becomes a large Hubble telescope, I'll be able to see the parts of the universe, and then deeper and deeper. But what happens is my senses are limited. So as a human being, all the time, as an architect, as a designer, I'm limited by these senses, and because of which there is this delusion, which is there all the time. So I don't see the space of the cup, but I see the cup. That's the delusion. And that happens in architecture also, which we have discussed earlier. That what I think as incredible forms, and I play with forms, is essentially I'm playing with space. So why? Because taking the analogy of this film, my body, my own body, which is dependent on these 5 elements, which all of us know: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Except for the space part, the first 4 is what I'm deluded with. That gives form its form. But that leads to space. But I never acknowledge that as a viewer. And that's how the delusion is maintained. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to get at, what these philosophies are trying to get at, is that, and that is changing without changing, is that, and that's also architecture of horizons, is that it's like a horizon, you know. When you look at a horizon, you can see the line of the horizon clearly. It's distinctly there. You can even photograph it. And these are not my words. This is what I've heard. But what happens when you move closer and closer and closer? You can never go and touch it. So what happened to the horizon? That's exactly how the cup is, which I'm unable to see right now because of this delusion. So, so if we have this view that whatever I'm playing with as forms is ultimately, it's a delusion. So I'm less anxious about trying to prove new things, being innovative. It really doesn't matter. You know, I will automatically quieten down that at the end of the day, anywhere I am, civilizationally, this is the truth. That all elements leads to this vast space. So I can start over and make my own delusions. And this is particularly for the young minds. That do I pay enough attention to my work as creating my own delusion? Do I go through that process inwardly? Or do I just glance over my shoulder and see some other fragments? I quickly bring them in, and I think that that's the form. That's where we have to really put our thoughts. So
do you think that that's a way of challenging yourself as a designer or an architect?
Oh, absolutely, because it's not just as an architect, but as a human being. And this, again, this has been spoken so many times by our teachers, that you go and ask a shopkeeper that, can I have the molecule or of that biscuit? Or, you know, go to a restaurant and say that, can I have 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 part of oxygen, please? You will be looked at in a very strange way. We don't do that. So, so yes, it is a huge challenge. We will keep being deluded. But the difference is, the changing without changing is that gradually, if I am constantly being aware that at the depth of it, all this is just a play of these elements. So this awareness actually makes all the difference, because what it makes is it makes you calm down. And that is what is required perhaps in the world. And not just me, so many other people have talked about this. This calming down has to be not just through not just through meditation, but actually understanding, why do I need to calm down? Because I have nothing to lose. If there is vast space underlying every form, as an architect, ultimately, if I create an incredible, beautiful form, well, it is still a form, it will change after some time. And that's why I was saying that nothing sticks. So can we have a view which keeps this in mind, that at the end of the day, it actually doesn't really mean anything. You know, we don't inhabit forms, we inhabit space. And that's where the slight shift in view could be. Sorry.
No,
Please go ahead.
I wanted to sort of establish over here. So when we're talking about silence, I think that's an intriguing concept, because you know, it is a philosophy, but also how it applies to the things that we do, to our everyday lives, the way we live, the way we are, our context, our physical environment, our mental state. And then it kind of translates into the work that we're doing. Interestingly, just to see that you're sitting against this blank wall currently, whereas I am probably the polar opposite of that, and I've got all this stuff happening behind me. Is that a reflection of our states of mind? I don't know. Perhaps it is. Perhaps for me right now, I'm in that space where I just want a lot of things that are going on around me. I know that I'm involved in multiple things at multiple times. I'm constantly multitasking. And this is something I want to talk to you about as well, perhaps a little later. But there seems to be this sort of, you know, serenity in your environment. And I'm going to take the liberty of asking whether this happens to be a blank wall that you're sitting in front of, or is this really your state of mind currently?
Look, at this moment of time, I'm completely deluded and got carried over by this blank look. It's a hang up that I'm going through right now. What will be really amazing for a person like me, or as a concept, is that if I can aspire to have that background which you have, after having gone through this. So that's the trick, you know, that is changing without changing, that you have this completely lots of colors and lots of patches on the wall.
You can call it crazy, I won't mind.
Okay, a crazy wall, a beautifully crazy wall, but I'm also aware that it doesn't really, it appears like that. That's the thing Mr. Ganju pointed out. How do we go beyond appearances? You see, it's the awareness of what is inside these forms, what is inside every object that we think is solidly existing over there, whether it's a painting or anything. So if I'm aware of it, then I would probably, hopefully, go beyond this blank wall and serene look.
But then tell me, Sanjib, then this has to also kind of reflect on the work that you're doing, right? And the kind of the material that you're producing, whether it's art or architecture or writing or anything for that matter. All these, the way that you feel manifests in what you do and your interactions, the way you speak with people. I'm a little curious because I've been familiar with your work. And I am going to come back to some of the works that you've done, because I think it's important even for our audience to make it a little more tangible and make it a little more relatable to them to understand the ideas that you're talking about. But some of the works that you've done are not necessarily, or at least in appearance, when you first look at them, the first thought that comes to your mind is not necessarily this idea of being calm or being very composed, but there are multiple layers and there are multiple ideologies that come into play. There are multiple elements that, you know, come together to form perhaps this larger idea. And if I can take the liberty of referencing one of your, more recent projects, which was at the Oberoi Hotel in Delhi, where you were able to capture this idea of, you know, this larger, this larger idea. And if I can take the liberty of referencing one of your more recent projects, which was at the Oberoi Hotel in Delhi, where you were able to capture this idea of, you know, this larger, this larger idea. And if I can take the liberty of referencing one of your more recent projects, which was at the Oberoi Hotel in Delhi, and this installation, it's a beautiful installation titled Atithi. And I would request you to kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Okay.
But if people have seen this installation, they would know, at least in first glance, that it's not a simplification, but it is a composite idea which has been represented in much complexity.
Yes. So yeah, let me bring that project in now. You see, when you are, let me put it like this, if I am able to understand what is going on inside things, if I'm not anxious, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just got a message saying, just really quickly, that the Instagram feed is actually going to get interrupted within the next couple of minutes, but the conversation will continue. So those on Instagram, please, once the feed ends, we will restart it. So please join in again. Sorry, Sanjib, please continue.
Not at all. So, that's what I was trying to get at earlier, that if I'm able to understand something as what is the nature of truth of everything, then what happens is that this is another example that is always mentioned when we are hearing from our teachers, is that it's like a mother watching a child playing on the beach, and the child makes this sandcastle, and there's a tide which is rising. So the mother keeps a watch constantly and let the child play as much as possible, create whatever has to be done, and at the right moment pulls the child back or says that don't do it now. But for the child, it's like, at that point of time, being an architect, is that the mother knows that not only the tide is rising, that it's only a sandcastle and it will break. But the child doesn't know that. So as an architect, when I build, that's the view I have, that it's a fantastic castle, it's a fantastic way to make things. But this overview which the mother has, it's not there. So when that comes to play, then what happens is I can keep on making sandcastles. There may be any number of tides. I will repeat the castle. So that's what probably you're mentioning as the layering in our work. Though all the layers that happen, and also please keep in mind that I'm not making things for myself. There is another person called a client.
Of course,
yes. And one has to respect and understand that as well. So all these theories are fine, but at the end of the day, it's what the client wants and how best you can deliver it. But the challenge that you can take is during your conversations, what can you put in silently? Not just in terms of the theories and the concepts, but even in making that, if you want to make something completely new, you're not afraid. You go ahead and make it, because you're convinced that this is something which will speak for itself. You don't have to again look over the shoulder and somewhere else, and you can keep creating things which are new. So talking about the Oberoi project, I had earlier mentioned the time that we are living in. This, it's just a coincidence that in 2017 it began, and took 1 year for us to complete the project. All these the emotions that we are going through in terms of the point of time and history, this is it's contained within this installation, and I'm calling it an installation, but it is, for me and for us, our whole team, it's an installation. It's a combination of architecture, product, art, and unless we had gone through these, 18, 19 years of experience earlier, this project wouldn't have been possible. And all the
So I think it'll be interesting just to describe to the audience, for those who don't know it by name, that this
Yeah.
particular installation is that when you enter the Oberoi in New Delhi, in the main lobby, before you can even reach the check-in counters and the reception area.
Yes.
The first, in fact, and it's rather intriguing, because the first point of contact earlier used to be, or the first sort of element that someone would notice earlier when stepping into that space would be the far end of that long linear sort of volume, which was the tree of life. And that became symbolic of the Oberoi. And, you know, that was something that was just there all the time and for so many years. But now when you enter, that tree of life has been veiled by this metallic installation, which is a crisscross. And Sanjib, I'll leave it to you to describe it more accurately. But it's this sort of a mesh or a network, a visual network that forms, that kind of stretches across two columns. And it's behind that, in the distance, that you see the tree of life. In fact, you don't necessarily notice it until you go around it. But we are referring to this particular installation in the lobby of the Oberoi in New Delhi.
Yeah. Should I bring in a visual now?
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. So are you just going to, yeah. So for people on, unfortunately, on Instagram, and no, actually they can see the screen. You should be able to see it as well. So we are good. We're good.
Yeah. So in brief, what we discussed with the client was that they wanted something completely different from what the legacy of Oberoi was. And they wanted to change the whole image of Oberoi's, and that tree of life was something that they still hold on to it. And that's why one of the requirements was that whatever you design, it should be visible. It cannot veil that. And they positioned it in this place. It was not our choice, which blocked off this main circulation area. And this was intentional. So you have to go around it. And the client also wanted something that would be enduring over a long period of time, not in terms of materials that we use, but as an idea, and is definitely Indian. So what we were able to come up with this idea of the client as the hotel and their legacy, and the incredible stories that I've heard about Oberoi and also experienced it myself, is the quality of service that they give. So it had to match all that in terms of its looks, manufacturing, detailing, all that. So taking all the ingredients of what the client told us, finally, it took us almost 4 months to conceptualize. We came up with the idea of Atithi. Now, this has a direct connection to what they are, what they do as a service industry. And then, how did we come to this concept, and why did it take so much time? Again, you see, looking at one's own nature and all the philosophies that we've had, I really, as a designer, didn't have to look anywhere else to come up with this. It was always there. This word Atithi has been there throughout in India. But the way I've grown up, I've always known that it's a person who arrives at your house. But as I looked deeper, I found that it is not at all so. And that really surprised me. So what it is about? It is talking about a tithi. It's a Sanskrit word, so no fixed date. So there you are. It means that the concept of uncertainty can be at your doorstep. The experiences that we are going through at 2020 can happen anytime. But when you're welcoming that whoever has come to your doorstep, that idea, there is a way to look at it. So it is the no fixed state part. And then myself, I'm also passing through this world as a guest. So that is another part of Atithi. I'm also an Atithi in this world for a very short time. So these changes again happen for a very short time. So the whole idea sprung from there, and then I started thinking about it and then delved deeper and deeper. So the idea of time came about because it is to do with uncertainty. And according to our philosophy, it says that when the guest comes, you look at the guest in a way which is not separate from yourself, but your own reflection. You see this thing of the mother, the word mother, I'll be talking about that. Why it is important is that when a mother gives birth to a child, it is an extension of that body. So that is putting it very, very crudely. But here it is talking of is that you have to look at the person that you think as separate from yourself as your own reflection. That's why the mirrors are there. And these mirrors are also designed and developed. It's a very special mirror. These are not glass mirrors. These are developed in Kerala. So coming back to the idea of time, past, present, and future, 3 layers. That's why the 3 screens are there. And constantly, as a human being, whatever role I play in the society or in this universe, I am constantly under the gaze of time. So my vision is always deluded by the past, and I cannot even see the present because I'm looking towards the future. So that's why the screens are placed in such a way that you have to look through these 3 layers. That's what it says. So this is the delusion that we have constantly. But if you take the first part and the third part away, that's living in the present, which is one of the most difficult things to do. That's not going to happen in my life very soon, but one can aspire. But the fact is that, you know, this is there in my mind all the time. And this is all, by the way, still about Atithi. So these 3 layers come. So what we did was, the philosophy, Indian philosophy says, so when the person comes, you look at the person not as separate from yourself, and then you invite, and there are these 5 steps which you have to do, where you have to offer water, flowers, food, all that. So there are these ways, the rituals which are done, which these people do very beautifully. So we took one element, which is the flowers, which is to have the element of the welcoming part, what we are offering to the guest. And it's also the word Atithi is also a reminder, because it's a reflection of myself, and I am consciousness, so I am nothing separate from the divine. So that part is also there. That's why the Atithi Devo Bhava. So these things, that's why it's layered. But you know, at the end of the day, it's about time. And we forget that these fragments, the past, the present, and the future, we forget. And that's why the whole thing of being in the present is talked about so much. Let me just take you through some more visuals. Can I do that?
Sure. In fact, while you're switching through some images, I actually want to bring into focus the idea of the 3, the trilogy, or the Trinity. And it's something that you mentioned earlier as well. And in this particular project, I know the reference is to past, present, future, but it also refers to the idea of your early morning, midday, and dusk, right?
Yes.
So, and this is something that I've actually observed over the years in a lot of your work, this reference to the number 3, which comes in various ways. And I was curious to know whether this is something that is an intentional sort of manifestation of philosophies and ideas, or is this something that just kind of happens and is more intuitive?
I think it's more intuitive. It's something that one doesn't really, I haven't thought about it, but if it keeps recurring, then it's definitely intuitive.
I mean, the idea of three actually has a great rhythm to it. I have realized that when I'm writing, in fact, I tend to use modules of three, not in terms of just in terms of describing things, in terms of elements, in terms of feeling. So I tend to use the module of three, and this is something that I actually hadn't noticed till very, very recently. Um, in fact, post some of our conversations, as recent as that. But it's something that I think it has that rhythm and it sounds well, it sits well with you. And it's an idea that has been incorporated or has been reflected in multiple philosophies in various religions, and something that also came up while we were talking about this particular conversation that we are having today. And you mentioned, like you mentioned earlier, you mentioned the mother, the teacher, and femininity. And again, that wasn't something that was necessarily meant to be a three element sort of feature, but it kind of came across as that.
Yeah. Let me go through the images and I'll come to that, or we can come back to the
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So that's the other view. And it catches lights in different moments, in different ways. Let me just put these things together.
May I ask you, Sanjib, since
yes,
you said that the client wanted this sculpture, this piece of art to be placed in a particular way as it stands today. I've seen it a few times. Which was the other place that you ideally had chosen for this place? Was there something else in your mind as you made it?
You have hit the nail. I'll be very, very honest. I would have chosen this very place.
You would have?
Yes.
So the client and you were there in a kind of synchronized situation?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason is that, in Indian philosophy, there is always this idea of veiling, not just through screens, but through space. Like in temples, we have series of courtyards, how you arrive at the Garbhagriha. It's never direct. And there is a reason for that, that you have to really, really acclimatize yourself mentally, spiritually. You have to grow before you enter the Garbhagriha. A person might not be aware of all this. And that's how sculptures were incorporated on walls, on pillars, on apertures, on floorings. These also had fantastic theories and meanings to them. So you have to go through them. So there is samsara first, and then gradually it becomes leaner and leaner and leaner till you are inside the Garbhagriha, where you just look at yourself, which is the deity. So you see, so the idea of veiling is very important, because to a deluded mind, if I say everything is space, they will feel that I really need mental asylum badly. So, you have to veil it through all this. And these guys understood all that. So architecture, coming back to this question, I'm expanding it. It's all about this play, this game which I was talking about. You keep on veiling, you keep on making your layers, which Mrinalini was talking. More the merrier. But the point is that, are those layers thought through by myself through a process of trying to reach out to this area, which is absolutely lean, and it has nothing but space. So if that is what is internally happening, then go ahead, deconstruction, why not? And so yeah, the placement, that's why I agreed, and it was very, very important, because a lot of people protested that, why have you placed it like that, but now people got used to it. They always get used to such things. It provided a lot of comfort space for the staff over there, because there used to be this lot of traffic into that, inside that straight, long space which was there. And a lot of sound also used to get echoed. All that stopped. So when people arrive turning around this pillar, around the screen, there is a sort of a, breaking down of their cells, which has already happened. It's in a very gentle way. People don't realize they protested earlier. Now, because they've got used to it, it's a kind of a balance between the outside and the inside. So you just don't let people come in straight. Even in my home, I would do that. I would put a screen somewhere. So, sorry, I got carried away with the question.
No. This is important.
So let me quickly take you through the photos.
This is like you mentioned earlier, right? Resisting change. So people were used to the lobby being a certain way.
That's right.
They resisted the change, but now they're used to it.
Yeah, I'm going to flip through. I've got 5 images. So these are the layers looked at from the side. And by the way, one thing I must mention here is that how did we arrive at the structuring of this? So when we were going through all the ideations, this whole thing of fragility, because time, how do you show time? And how do you touch that idea? And also something that's impermanent. And what we were talking earlier about dependent origination of parts depending on each other to make the whole. Now, these 3 things are combined in this, and we thought of a structure. Structure-wise, it's not earth-shattering. These kind of structures have happened, but the context in which it is being done and the elements we could think of, is very, very important. The crafting of this, the engineering that came in, and by the way, the technology now, see the technology that we had to use. I'll show you some pictures. All this made it possible to convey an idea which has been there for last 2,500 years ago. We did not convey anything new. Yet, it is like bringing out something from my depth of the findings of my nature, which is deluded to see the present moment, not to be able to see the present moment, into this concept of atithi and in the present time. And here you are. So the parts are movable, and if you move one part, it affects other parts, and that's how life works. And this is how to get back to your earlier question, is that why have we come to the stage if we are not preparing ourselves? Because we are not aware that we affect other people, other things, our environment, nature. If I'm not aware of those realities, whatever I make will have alienation and will be in isolation. So this is a narration where one is saying that nothing exists in isolation. It is dependently existing. So this piece has this feel of, it doesn't look solid. It has a certain sense of fragility. Of course, these are all tensile structures and design. So if I go into it, yes, all those will come out. But the appearance. So ultimately, it's a delusion which has been created. And these, the flowers that you see, they can be turned. So from an object which is like a flower, it becomes a mirror. And this is the mirror which is made in Aranmula. I must also mention the team which worked, and I think Bibin is also part of this. The whole team, without this team, this concept was not possible. See, so again, dependent origination. And alone, you can't do anything. Without Anjalee, without our team, without this whole environment of enabling this, not just this concept, anything is not possible. So more and more, if I look at my own nature, I see that I am dependent on so many things. And this is where the what the artisans believe. They have the story that the mirror is made, it's an alloy, and it was offered to Lord Vishnu. And looking at this mirror, it's basically polished metal. And because of the alloy, which is very special, it's more vivid than glass mirror, because glass has a certain depth. This is a direct reflection from the surface. It is extremely auspicious. So we took that concept and we built it into this. There's some.
I think
I can't see you, Mrinalini.
Yeah.
You can't see me?
Ankit, maybe you
Now
have to switch off some of the participant sound.
Yeah, they've been muted. That's fine.
No,
Yeah.
Everybody is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashok came in between.
So Sanjib, do you want to talk a little bit about the Trinity, the importance of Trinity, considering that it has been also a critical part of this particular installation?
Well, if you're talking about the feminine mother and teacher, okay.
Before we get into that, I want to understand the significance of the three, the significance of this sort of threefold idea that appears in various forms and manifests in various ways in your work and in some of the philosophies that you've mentioned.
It's not necessarily the number three that manifests all the time. It's just coincidental. Again, I can't see you, Mrinalini.
Am I visible now?
Yes, now you are.
Okay.
But from my limited knowledge, three is the most. It's a stable. It creates stability. That's the minimum number that you need for stability. And three also it represents, from our philosophy, which points one part of the triangle. If you see a triangle, it points upwards. So towards bettering oneself in terms of spiritual growth. So that's why the triangle is very, very important. But all that, to me as a person, as an architect, all that is fine. For me, the most fundamental basis for three is time, which is in everything, which is we are totally, totally bound by time. Everything is bound by time. And past, present, future. So there you are. You cannot deny that. You don't need any theories for that. It's there, inside you, outside you. And that's how the space element also comes in. If we talk of space, time comes in. We talk of time, it's an alter ego. It's a reflection. So these two things work together. And for an architect, personally speaking, it's extremely important to know this, the logic, the way people looked at it. And we are, right now, I'm just not even able to scratch the surface. Like I said, I'm not a scholar. But these are peripheral understanding. But that has affected our work, my own self, the way I think. Because, you know, the whole thing of hurrying with an agenda has quietened down. I know business-wise, you need it, commercially you need it, you have to perform all the time, but somewhere it balances out. You really don't have to do anything because the way the universe is structured, it balances out. Whatever you're aspiring within gets reflected, and rest of the things balance out accordingly. So if I have, talking about the three elements, the feminine, mother, and teacher, the role of a team, the role of Anjalee has been very, very important in that sense. because again, it's dependently originating. So when I'm talking of the concept of three, if I'm aware that with time, if I'm aware of the time, and if I'm aware that everything is changing all the time, the concept of change, and if that is within me all the time, nothing is fixed, my whole approach will be very, very different towards work. And the reason I'm mentioning the team and people of our organization, I'm sure everybody works in very similar way. I'm pointing out something here. I'm trying to point out something as the concept of three as the feminine mother and teacher, because one thing leads to the other. Mother, feminine gives rise to mother, and mother gives rise to teacher. And we are not talking of a woman here. It's not about gender. It's a phenomena. It's an element. It's a way of thinking. It's an idea. So what I feel is that the feminine is an overarching phenomena which mirrors all other material phenomena within and around our body. That's the quality of feminine, which I have learned. And it's part of the three. It's also an environment where things are born and they wither as a play in a balance and in tranquility. So that's the role of this element called the feminine. And space is one amazing example which we are constantly delving into, we are dealing with as designers and architects. But this quality, if I keep in mind, my attention towards form will have a different quality completely, because the driving force is not form, the driving force is space. How closer and gradually I'm able to experience space better and better and better. So is a fantastic form able to do that? Normally it takes away, it distracts from space. But the leaner it is, and that's why I took this point from Mr. Ganju's talk, is quintessential architectural experience. And that's why the example of ashram as a shelter, and need not be with thatched roofs, sloping roofs, being gentle in its spirit. And that's where familiarity also comes in, because you see, the more closer in understanding we are in terms of our nature, because that's the truth, I will be becoming more familiar with my own nature. It will immediately get reflected around me, because everything is projections of my mind. That also has been established as a science. We'll talk about that some other time. And if it is a projection of my mind, if everything is that, whatever I am within gets reflected. And that's also the change without changing. So instead of changing everything else, let me first change what has been going on in my mind in terms of my perception, understanding, the way I look at form, space. That perception, if I can change, then everything changes completely overnight. And this, yeah, please.
No, it's interesting that you're saying all of this. And I think what becomes most critical for the audience is to see how that translates into the more tangible, into the work that you're doing, or into just being the person that you are in your interactions and engagements. And we, just at this point, we got a question, an interesting question from Abhishek Mathur. Abhishek, if you don't mind, Sanjib, I'm going to ask Abhishek to come and share his question with us.
Sure.
Abhishek, if you could just unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you prefer for me to read it out.
No, that's quite all right. Thanks, Mrinalini. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Hi, Abhishek.
Hi. I'm just super interested in what you were saying earlier. All of this sounds really fascinating. And the question is this, I wanted to know, how are you able to edit your thoughts and inspirations to abstract them into a tangible creation? Is there a process that enables you to do so? And, I just asked this on the behalf of myself and a few people who sometimes have had, these sort of insights where we are trying to combine, the deeper learnings about our world, our material world, and trying to also then work towards more tangible goals of our, everyday design activities, right? Dealing with our creations. And I have personally speaking, I sometimes have these bouts of analysis paralysis, and I see you've been able to overcome that in some of your work. And I would like to know, is there a process that enables you to do so? How can we learn from your successes?
Is it possible to see you, Abhishek? Mrinalini, is that
Yes,
possible?
Yeah, he can.
yeah,
You can
I
control
can.
that.
I have to remove. Would you give me like 2 minutes just to
Are you
essentially
trying to silence the space around you, Abhishek?
a little bit? Hang on, hang on. It's almost there.
Maybe he got his son on
I,
his lap, yeah, probably. Let him be also there, Abhishek.
no,
No
no, it's
problem.
okay. Hi.
Oh, that's
Hi,
you only.
hi.
Hi.
So good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too.
I can, yeah. So that was not just a very big question. It's a very important question, and probably it's going to help a lot of younger people. So I'll try to be as simple as possible. What I was talking about, and there is no direct answer, just one answer to this. It's again a process. Uh, one part is the Saundarya Drishti, the aesthetic view that I was talking of. So this comes from an attitude. The attitude is what? That when I look at a tree, in Indian philosophy, the Saundarya Drishti says that the whole being a whole still remains a whole. That's one part. I'll explain this. And if you take away parts of that whole, it will still remain whole. And I'll illustrate this within an example. What it essentially means is that nothing exists as is, like a cup or a tree doesn't exist in isolation as a solid entity. It is in continuum. And because it is in continuum, if I see a tree, a bird comes and sits on the tree was complete. The bird comes and sits in the tree, it is still complete. The bird flies away and something goes away from the tree, it still remains complete. So see the attitude. This is, to me, it's fantastic. This attitude of not thinking anything can become not whole or remain not whole in nature, even if it is in fragments or as is. So that is one part. This to me is extremely calming. Then the other things that we were talking of about looking at the parts becoming an entity, if I know that, then all the processes that I have to go through while creating, I will not be bound in any way. I'll be completely free to try out anything. So if I can sense the question correctly, it's the anxiety of that process. So that anxiety goes away. And how do I sense that I've arrived at a certain point? You really don't have to do anything. There is a finite amount of time that the client will give you, or the circumstances will give you. Whatever you arrive at, if you look at it with these things in mind, trust that. There is an element of trust that has to be there, because you couldn't have done more or better than that. And you have to put a stop to that. So, you can keep on making iterations. Where do you put a stop? So it's bound by that particular time. Whatever happens, trust it. So it remains whole. Nothing has been taken away from it. Whatever you have created, it will become something, it will become whole. And that trust has to be there. I hope that eases some of the queries that you had.
Yes, I feel much relaxed now. Thank you.
I had a question thank you, Abhishek. I had a question. Starting from your nearly first premises that we have created many wounds in our lives, in the surrounding, in the entire environment. And I think partly we credit it. I'm sure I would credit it to the pace that we work. The pace is something that takes away from contemplation. Contemplation and the way you see actually each move in the environment. So if I would have a different pace, things would probably look different.
Yes.
If I see the time differently, then the outcome would be different of our activity within the environment. I fully share that with you. Now, and my question drives not towards this abstraction, but towards a tangible result that we look when we contribute to our environment with our work. Now, in the entire process from designing to making, say, the sculpture at the Oberoi's, where do you see that you have removed some of the wounds that otherwise we create while being active in our environment, with our environment? Where do you see your role there?
Well, one part of sorry, can I answer?
Yeah, please.
One part has been to heal, like I was saying earlier, by informing ourselves what existed before. And we don't put effort in any other direction, but look at what we already have. That's very much part of healing, because the best healing is to work with your own body, which is something that you already have. So physically, if it is that, I look at my tradition and then look at my own philosophies. We found Atithi. So that's a huge healing, because now the Oberoi's can talk about a concept that has been there, which is Indian, which is also not Indian in the sense that it is timeless. It just dissolves all boundaries because it's talking of time. So the process of healing is, if I am aware of time, this is the third process of healing, then I'm also able to decide what is hurried and what is unhurried and move accordingly in my work. And your question actually, it is tempting me to show a visual which I had kept for the end. If you want, I can show it. That's okay, I can show it now, because it's got to do with pace. It's got to do with...
in fact, here, I would like to, if you have that visual, I would like to have the Tirthankar, that's how you call it, the image that you had published in the Mondo. I find that very compelling. Do you have that in your collection?
That I'll show eventually, but I had, yes, of course, I'm going to show that. Of course, it's very, very important.
It's a very important one, yes.
And what I was going to share is this. It's not a rocket science image, but the juxtaposition is what is very important. So you see, talking about pace, these are the two comparisons. The lower one is one of our works. The upper one shows a way of life, or an attitude, or an approach towards architecture, design, life, living, which cuts through. And the second one is something that winds around, it doesn't cut through. And the simplest is the river, one of the teachers. And this also brings me to my background, having grown up in Bengal, and I'm a river child. So probably that's how the surface is. So these, you reach point A to B very quickly. Yes, and without any impediments, without any challenges, absolutely. But it has a price. So if I'm aware of that price now that we are, am I willing to do something about it? Do I learn from the river which winds around challenges, around impediments, and flows. So the idea is to flow, not cut through. And by the way, the portions of the river, if I don't know, this is what I have experienced. You know, portions of Ganga is extremely fast. So if I take one portion, actually this one straight line is very much part of it, but then it also knows when to slow down, and it doesn't have to do anything. It just happens by itself naturally. So in our work, in life, in living, the trick is to not, and the trick is to create things, do things by more and more non-interference with what exists. So if you leave a land fallow, things will grow. Fukuoka is one example, one straw revolution. And I wish the scientists of this country and other countries would take his philosophies. So you really don't have to do much. And what Abhishek was also asking, how do we go around that? By not trying to do too much, by knowing what to take away as interferences. That in design is extremely helpful. I hope this talks about pace and what we were talking about. So the pace
brilliant image, brilliant. Really, love it. Yes.
I completely lost the thread. What we were discussing earlier. Just remind me, please. Yeah, the three: the feminine, mother, and teacher.
The feminine, teacher, and mother. Yeah.
So what I was saying is that one leads to the other, and these are elements synonymous with space. That's why I thought of bringing them. I was not very sure earlier, but then I thought, what the hell? Since I've taken the leap, might as well. I'm very enthused by Abhishek's question. So as I was reading the definition of feminine, so space is one example. Then the universe within which everything happens, everything. And the third example is also what I spoke of earlier about the village, the gram. That's also designed and built on the concept and the image of a universe, which is the body, which is a universe in miniature. So there were communities which were designed, the spaces were designed in such a way that they used to look after each other. Each community would take up a responsibility, who had more money to look after the communities, who would produce things for everybody's use. So the responsibility of feeding them, providing things was taken. So that's how it used to be.
So there's a sense of cohabitation and codependence.
Cohabitation and codependence of a certain scale, because if it goes beyond a certain scale, it's checked. Then another gram comes out. But in the modern context, that's not so. So the scale of the parts have to be kept in mind. Then talking about the mother, why it leads to the concept of mother, because again, I find the concept of mother is innate within the concept of time, because the previous moment gives birth to the next moment. So that's the mother. If I'm so aware of my biological mother and all the processes, this is the other end of the spectrum, time. That's the mother, which gives rise to everything, including my delusions and realizations. So that's one example. Then the concept of mother, why it symbolizes space is also, it's the whole emotion, the feeling about mother image it's infinite. And why do I say that? Because when a person gives birth to, a mother gives birth to a child, this is what I was earlier talking of, that there is no feel of separation. You ask any mother, of course there'll be exceptions, but this whole thing of continuity, this whole thing of extension, that it is part of me. So here is a very important pointer from the Indian philosophy, that this concept of mother comes very close to the concept of non-dual. Now, non-dual by itself is more than that. We are not going to discuss that, but this could be very, very close. Then I took the example of a pot, a simple pot, which also to me is a mother, because, you know, it seems that it separates space between the inside and the outside. But if the pot breaks, there is no difference. And we don't pay attention to such a event happening when the pot breaks or anything breaks. I'm bringing this example because space has that quality. And if I can create this form which has the potential of connecting space in my own delusion way, where I'm aware that these spaces are all just one space, it's not separate. So the spot does that very beautifully, like a mother, like it's an extension of the inside space to the outside space, like the child. I also feel that a location, a geographical location when I'm born, where I'm born, that land is very important. And I hold it like the mother for no other reason, because again, it's an extension. It's what gives rise to so many things unconditionally. There is no condition. Of course, now lots of things have changed, but you know, this connection with a location is very, very important. And that's why also I think it's high time at this point of time, we look at our location and what that location holds and what we can learn and do from that by actually learning to not just to see, just to familiarize ourselves is also the mother.
But Sanjib, at this point, wouldn't you say that considering the times we're in, a lot of us are arguing about these boundaryless spaces, and we're talking about a more universal sort of context, right? As opposed to actually being grounded to where you've been born or where you've been brought up, or but just looking at space and you're looking at the universe in a more holistic manner.
Yeah, you see, what Viren and I were discussing earlier is that the facility to move around fast breaks that sense of patience to hold on living in one place. Because I have a facility, I use that. And this narrative of technology that I was talking of, it forces you to do that. It encourages, it facilitates that. Now, I'm not at all saying that I think it's fantastic to be able to travel and move around and see things and experience things. But do I spend enough time wherever I am, not necessarily where I'm born, wherever I am, do I spend enough time to understand that location fully, properly before I move out? Or I keep moving on and never understand what a location means, ever. So when people say this universal and this and that, what is a universe? If my body is a universe, why am I floundering around everywhere? I can just sit quietly in one place, and people have done that. So the idea of this universal world is not about the outer universe, is to realize that there is a universe which is completely in tandem. It's a reflection of the inner universe. There is nothing that is not a reflection.
No, all the more reasons. I don't mean travel, but I mean more in terms of belonging, right? As opposed to, instead of belonging to a particular place or a location or a position, you just belong to the universe. You're part of this larger truths that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So if you keep on enlarging the model, like a miniature model is my body, and then where I am, my house, and the languages that I speak, experiences that I have, all the citizenships that I have. As long as I know that each one in its own stage, at different stages, are universes.
And
so
play their own roles.
Play their own role. The problem is that the pace of living is so high that we get carried away with that. The attention span is very short to experience this. And unless we experience this, how are we going to tap into it? And if you're not able to tap into it, we are always going to look at somebody else's view, which is also part of the next part of Saundarya Drishti, is that unless you have a Saundarya Drishti, which is a view, I'm always going to lean on somebody else's view. And the problem with that is that it creates a lot of frictions, all kinds of things. But if I'm convinced about my own way of looking at things, I calm down. That can only happen by understanding a location. Which leads to the idea of teacher. Again, the concept of time, because all this we were talking of, because one moment, the previous moment hands over. And that's the role of a teacher. Even what we are doing today, it will become like a learning point at some point of time, hopefully for some people or so many people. So we do this role of handing over. And these three things we try in our own work environment, or it can be done in any work environment. These three things, if they are kept in mind, that this, there is this quality of environment which is feminine, which I described. And then as a designer or as a young designer, I'm creating things. Suppose I'm making a piece of furniture like a chair or say a house or a building. I am the mother, I'm giving birth to that. And then gradually as I learn, the same young person has suddenly become a teacher because they are ready to hand over these things. But the challenge is that one has to go through this grind. Only then they get connected. So they work in tandem. And another quality of teacher is that it's, like I was saying, unconditional, it pours out. That's another huge quality of a teacher. So it used to happen, it happens with some places of learning. Even now, there are teachers who give unconditionally. We had some teachers like that. And then later on, outside school and college, I was really blessed with many people as teachers. And here I would like to, I'll in a moment bring in an image which is quite amazing. A teacher also makes you see first, the ability to see, and not what you see, the ability to see. Because what you see is completely irrelevant. It does not matter. And I'll at this point like to bring in some of my works. I thought of showing them because it summarizes something that we've been talking of, is that you really don't have to go anywhere. If you go, that's fantastic. You get a rebound of what you've been doing, but that's not going to really change from what you had to say. Really, that basis doesn't change. So these are a few sketches of cats which were there in Katie's office where I was working. And there the whole process started. And the beauty of that place is, again, like a teacher, that environment of that office, and Katie himself and our colleagues, each one of them, we had cats, we had fish in the pond, we had birds coming in the garden, and the colleagues, I think Badri is there, each one of them have been my teachers, are my teachers. So this again, for the young minds, extract, it's up to you to create that environment of feminine mother and teacher from wherever you are. It is absolutely possible. So Katie's office was not from, dropped from somewhere in the sky, or it was not Oxford or MIT, but the kind of things we learned. To give you one example, during my first interview, when I met Katie, I told him that I can draw, and I don't have many things to show as a portfolio. But I'm very interested in art, and I do these works, and I would like to combine them together. So he said that go ahead and do anything you want, anything. So what happens is this feminine and the mother, you get an environment of comfort. And this comfort is not doesn't make you lazy. It actually makes you work more and more. Why? Because you want to challenge yourself with that comfort, because you are excited. So each one of those elements became a teacher. And before I show the image, a teacher also ultimately, if he or she is a good teacher, teaches you that you don't need a teacher. That's the whole point. If that happens, because again, you're looking inwards, but we don't know. My deluded mind always looks for a separate output teacher, and I need that crutch till I reach that point. So that is why the role of an output teacher is so important. So to me, a successful teacher, which in my life, I've got many. And then when you move over to the next one and next one, basically then you don't need that teacher. So that earlier teacher has been extremely successful in conveying that. You don't get stuck. Not because the teacher has not been able to teach you anything, but make you realize that you have got it now. Okay, let me just show you one image, which is again to do with, before I come to my drawings. This is an image of an insect. This I found in the jungles of Pachmadi, which I was visiting. Now you see, talking about, so what I'll just share with you what it does. It kind of camouflages itself with trash, whatever it finds. And I found that fascinating, because no color, no texture, no skin, nothing, but whatever it finds, it camouflages itself, and that's technology. And why it is also important is that we talk about minimalism. How much more minimalistic can you become? So there you are. We have an idea of minimalistic with whatever you have. I just wanted to share this. And so this becomes a teacher for me. So nature is a very big teacher. And then a tree. And I'm saying this for an audience in schools and colleges. You know, the best part of a tree is, we all know about it. And this was pointed out by one of my teachers, is that if I constantly observe it throughout the year, spring happens, new shoots come out, flowers happen, the fruits are there, and then again, everything is shed, everything withers, becomes totally bare. Now, if I look at my situation as being totally bare, don't have anything, if I have the conviction of my own nature that it will spring again, all this is happening, all this process that's happening on the tree is happening on its own root. That is the most important thing. It doesn't reach out to another tree's root for all this process to take place. This, I think, is a fantastic pointer. So wherever I am, I can work with that. It's workable. Things will wither, things will also spring. And then Barakpur, where I grew up. So the background is extremely important. Like I was saying, that it was a river town. And Bengal, as you know, it's full of green, water, creatures, birds, bees, fruits. So all that becomes huge learning points. I'll just quickly show you the pictures that I was talking of earlier.
Since you're talking about your journey, it'd be great to see some of your earlier artworks that you've done.
Yeah, I'm just going to...
Your sketches and drawings and things. Also, just to take this time to say that we are reaching a 2-hour mark. So the Instagram video might have stopped. We are going to restart it for those who are on Instagram and who are waiting to join us again. And we will be taking some questions. So whoever has questions, please share them on the chat window on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Zoom, and we'll be taking those up.
Sorry, they don't seem to be in a sequence. That's okay. So these are some of the artworks which I indulged in. I had a heart surgery. This was almost more than 30 years back. So I was in Motibag recuperating, and that's how the whole process started, of starting to look at what is around me and within me. So these are very, very ordinary situations of government quarters, and which led to these drawings and paintings. The important thing is not what it is showing, but the important thing here is that you can work with whatever you have. And the cats, there is a, this is Moonrise.
Is that a painting?
Yeah.
That's a painting, yes.
Goodness.
There were many of them, Sanjeev, were exhibited at the Triveni Art Gallery, right? If I'm not
That's
mistaken.
right. That's right. And there is a sudden contrast. Actually, I don't have most of the reproductions with me. They're all lost. There's a boy who was working with me as to sketch his body. There's a image of that.
Yeah.
So again, working with what you have. Yeah. I will bring, sorry, please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You had a question.
No, I was just going to ask that, considering we've talked about this whole journey and time and sequences and all of that, where do you think you're at right now?
See, again, if it's agenda-less, it's not really important for me. And this I can share with you and wherein, but probably to a client I'll mumble something out. But you know, really, when we are talking about these philosophies, it's endless, and it's like I said that Saundarya Drishti says that everything is in continuum. If I say I'm at this point of time, I'm freezing things, and I've expected this to happen, and I plan accordingly. So, of course, you have to sense intuitively how things are going and whether they're going in the right direction. Like this conversation itself, this was not planned. All this was not part of the agenda. It just somehow grew. So to me, it's not that important to label it in that sense, but you know, you can sense these things. So the problem with labeling is then there is a room for, so things are not happening this way, or it didn't go in the right direction, and then the whole approach changes. So whatever happens, if you trust in that and move accordingly. I'm not talking about cleaning the floor and, you know, organizing your files and sending drawings at the right time to the client. Yeah, of course. But overall.
But I think it's also important to start addressing things at that level as well, right? I mean, just given the fact that we've been, well, the whole world has been in a lockdown for the last 4 months. And it's a really real phenomenon. It's not something that can be ignored, can be denied. It's not something that, you know, we can't just keep talking about philosophies, ignoring the fact that we are all kind of stuck in this zone that doesn't necessarily seem to have an end in sight, or something that can necessarily be related to in very real terms, right? There's just so much uncertainty. And so it begs to kind of question, what has been this time? How has this time been for you? What have been some of your biggest challenges? Maybe some of your sufferings. Like, what is it that's really, or has this been one of those, like I'm getting a lot of mixed responses from people. I speak to so many architects, and some people are saying that they've been hyper efficient and effective, and others are saying that they've just kind of taken this as a break, and they've said, we're pausing things for the time being, and we'll see how it goes. So where are you at this moment or in time, not at that larger scale, but at a more intimate space?
Yeah, the problem is that for me, it's difficult to disassociate from that larger scale, but I'll try and do that. So of course, in terms of environmental impact, this has been a huge help in terms of Delhi's climate, pollution, world over. Rivers have again got rejuvenated. Trees have had a breather. All that, yes. But that's not the point we're trying to make, because whatever happens, like I was saying, that things will arise and wither. This is part of a process. As soon as lockdown ends and the vaccine is found, things will go back to normal. This to me has been a huge reminder that this is not something intellectual, this impermanence. It's for real. And it's there flowing under my feet all the time. It's just that I just deny that constantly. This to me has been a fantastic hammer on my head, a blow, to feel it, experience it, because there are practices on impermanence, but you don't really get to feel it till it really hits you physically. So as a reminder, now when I again get back for the so-called coming things back to normalcy, this reminder will be there. I'll be carrying it probably in a much more convinced way, the much more manifest way. It was somehow it was not getting under the skin, but it has, and I'm sure it has happened for many people differently. So this is my take. It's a great reminder.
Yeah, in fact, instead of separating it from that larger perspective, I think this is a moment in time where all of us can use to reflect on what that is for us, right? And for each one of us, it might be different. What we are seeking, or what we feel, or that river that runs beneath our feet, for each one of us, it might be different. It might mean something different. It might feel different. But instead of separating that and saying that, okay, this is, because we don't know what that normal is, what the new normal is. We don't even know if it is going to be a new normal. So it's not like this is a journey that's going to end and then something's going to start. I think very few of us, or a lot of us, are thinking in those terms. But what it's probably going to be is a very gradual evolution into something else. So it's not like there's a tunnel which ends and there's light beyond it, perhaps. But it's this sort of, gradual movement towards what everyone's referring to as a new normal. But maybe this is a moment for us to really kind of look into it and see where all of us are at.
I have something to say about the new normal. I think this whole thing about new normal is something that has been just, it's been talked about a lot, but nothing really changes in terms of human nature, Nothing really changes, and nothing really changes about the ways the universe works. This is the way it works. You interfere with it, it will affect you in a certain way. So what is the new normal that we are talking of? The new normal for me that I'm thinking of, if at all, if I'm successful, is to acknowledge that, am I able to be aware of it, of this impermanence, this uncertainty, this fragility? And can I be much more quieter, calmer about not reaching out, increasing my pace all the time. That would be a new normal if that can happen. So that's the way I feel this whole change of the virus that has affected our lives. This is, it's like I was saying, it's a great reminder for me. And as a land, as a civilization, the learnings that we have always pointed this out. But where is the time to look at it? And that's what needs to be done. Viren was, I think, very keen to see that the Tirthankar image.
Yes.
Can I show that?
Please,
if you have time.
Yeah.
Viren?
We are getting some interesting comments. While you pull that up, I'm going to read something from Hemant Mahajan, who says that, Sanjeev, for the last 2 hours that we've been here, your talk has been very intuitive, connecting to art, craft, and philosophy. And your connections are truly inspiring. There's been a driving force is a space and not a form. You want to challenge yourself to become a good person. Happy to witness this journey. So,
thank you so much, Hemant.
Hemant Mahajan, sorry.
Oh, it's Hemant. Okay.
It's not
Thank
Hemant Sangvi this time.
Hemant, thank you. Thank you so much for connecting in that way. It's very encouraging to hear that, because I was very nervous, and I shared this with Mrinalini and Viren that, do you think I should really blurt these words out? Will it at all make any sense? But then I think they were very encouraging by the questions they were asking. They're also very skillful. So here we are to have audience like you responding like this. I want to bring these two images. So this is an image of, can you see? It's a cutout of a human form. So
just pull it back from the screen a little bit, Sanjeev. Yeah.
Yeah. So this image it's an ancient image. It comes from the Jain philosophy. It's an image of a Tirthankar, a realized one. And this is considered form. Okay. Now it has emerged from this. Can you see?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just pull it back again towards you.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
You can see me through this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did this cutout specially because in a picture it was not possible to show it like this. So, if I put the 5 elements besides that, which is myself and all other material phenomena, this is how the truth works. So what I call as architecture is actually space. So there you are. And the Tirthankars figured this out that time. So where do I go for any other inspiration other than my location? And this can happen in any culture. This is what I tapped into, and I want to bring it out. I want to share it with whoever I know. So this is the beauty of this. And this leads to, again, then the whole thing of non-duality and emptiness and all that. But this is not the time and place to discuss that. So wherein that's what it is about.
Yeah.
Viren, would you like to add something?
What I find fascinating listening to Sanjeev is that he acknowledges something which we have missed out in I think the 20th and 21st century a lot, is the continuity of our legacy. I feel in his work as well, what he spoke today, the idea of the past moving into your present work is very essential. That connection between the past and present, which I feel, especially now in Indian context, is being rejected by the younger generation. It's not being acknowledged. And I think if you stop acknowledging the past, then you are living in a state of I wouldn't call it illiteracy. That sounds little pejorative, but I think you live in a state of misinformation, and you live in a state of void, void in a negative way, where you are not able to make sense out of what you are contributing to your environment. I think the past is very important to continue, especially in the field of design and architecture. I can only talk about that. And I feel what comes very beautifully through with your talk is this very fact that we have to all the time connect to the past. And your last piece of sculpture, I would call it a piece of wisdom that is manifested through the Tirthankar, shows only that how strongly we connect to our larger environment and ourselves through not only philosophies but through manifestation that come from the past. So the past has been able to skillfully address, like you tried with your Oberoi sculpture, address actually your abstract thoughts into real world harmony, create beauty and harmonies. I think after there I have a small anecdote. I did about 15 years back a Osho meditation. I was telling you that, and we had to write the first day as we entered that ashram. We had to write a note about ourselves and generally what we think. And that scribble was, I would say, very disharmonious, was very fragmented. But after a few days of meditation, we had to write again about ourselves and our thoughts. And suddenly, just this little meditation and the approach to our writing changed. Suddenly, the writing was more fluid, more harmonious, more legible. That means the form of inner transformation is so important for creating an external transformation and an external healing of the wounds, as you call it. So the the talk that you gave today is actually about that. It starts with the internal, and I think that is what makes the Eastern world, as against, if I may put it, against the Western world, which is very much driven by the material perception and its transformation, the perpetuating material world versus the internal world that we know from the East. I think that makes it very powerful tool to work within our wounded environment and transform it beautifully in harmonious way. I think that's what we are looking for. And I think your reference to Ashish Ganju was very adequate, because he, like yourself, are seeking that and working on that in different at different
Yes,
I would say scales and in different fields and through different methods. I would say, for example, Ashish is a lot into education and in activating a larger community, while you as an artist are trying to express skillfully through your work. And I must say that for me it has been a tremendous eye opener towards your life and yourself, because I don't know you much actually, as much as know you today. I must admit that I have not heard you. I've heard you at the Alliance Francaise talking about your work, and I'm glad today that you didn't speak much about your work. I know your work is humongous in its scale.
yeah, it
And it's
includes
very,
architecture as well, but it doesn't make
yes,
sense today. Yeah.
therefore what Mrinalini rightly said, you have a blank canvas behind you,
Yes, thank
which
you
is
for that.
wonderful, because that's how we are able to focus completely onto what you're saying.
Yes.
I'm very glad that, and thank you so much. That's all I can say. It's overwhelming what you said today to me.
No, it just you know it happened. It flowed like the river.
Yeah.
Really, of course I had to agonize for some time. How should one put it across? But I think the inspirations come from both of you, and thank you for this blank canvas, because otherwise these conversations will never take place. And this is what is required in our office environment, in terms of a team, a partner. In my case, I've been very, very blessed, and also outwardly, that we have to make, rather than what I do, enabling environments where things can grow, things can happen. each one of us to enable that environment. If you allow me just 2 more minutes, I will share one short story.
Of course.
If you have.
It's
You
your
know,
day. You can continue.
no, I'm sure it's been a long session. This I learned, this I heard from one of my dear friends who has worked with the Adivasis for a long time, like 50 years now. And this was long time back. He had mentioned the story to me. I was absolutely fascinated by what he said. And this happened in Bastar, where he was staying. This was many, many years back. He was sitting with the Adivasis and they were chatting over some intoxicating material. And he was very curious because he was also working with the government, and he was trying to facilitate lots of things for them, including shelter making. And one of his roles was to see that they get enough space and clean space and all that, enough room to be in and not really crowd around in one place. Their huts were very, very small. So he asked one of the guys that, why do you people keep crowding into one hutman at night when you have the government giving you so many other shelters? They're willing to give it to you. Why do you keep refusing this? Why don't you have more spaces for yourself? So his answer was that, look, our shelter is not the hut. We take shelter because at night, because all the spirits, they take shelter at night outside. So we don't want to disturb them. So it's only to pass that time. Otherwise, we are all outside. That's our shelter. So we don't want to intrude in their shelter, and they don't want to intrude our shelter. So we try and make it as small as possible in 1 or 2 hutments. So there you are, the whole perspective of space completely turned on its head comes from the Adivasis. It's amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But Sanjeev, I have to say that it's taken a while for this conversation to happen. And I would say more than just a few weeks. I've been trying to convince you to express yourself for many years now. But I couldn't be happier. And I'm so grateful for you having taken out the time for joining us today and for doing it in this forum. I know it's not easy, and I know you had certain apprehensions about, addressing a large gathering and a large audience, but I'm sure that, and I know we're getting messages from people across platforms saying how motivated they feel and how inspired they are. I would like to thank you on behalf of Matra, Viren, myself, and the entire audience for having this very candid, very honest, and very insightful conversation with us today. It's really been wonderful. And like I told you, it's definitely going to be over an hour. And I think it's been worth every minute that we've spent together. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks to you guys, and thanks to all the teachers that I've had. Actually, I'm just the via media. It just happens to be there. There's a coincidence. But all the teachers, so to all students, especially, grab the teacher, whoever you can find, in nature, in person.
Yes,
thank you
definitely.
So much.
And for people whose questions haven't been answered, apologies for that. Please feel free to send them to us. I'm actually going to take the liberty of offering KAARU's Instagram profile. And if you'd like to share your questions, and Sanjeev, maybe you can take some topics up over there for discussion as well. So feel free to contact Sanjeev through Instagram on KAARU. You can get in touch with me on Instagram. My handle is Ghadiok, and with Matra _architects. You can email us, message us. However, we're all very approachable, and we're here to have more and more conversations and discussions, as many as we can. But thank you all for being here, our entire audience on Instagram, on Facebook, on Zoom. Thank you so much. Viren, any closing words?
not a closing word because there's no end to this.
There isn't.
But I want to express Mark is with us today, and I've also not met and spoken to him for very long. So he's expressed how much he loved your thoughts, listening to your thoughts, Sanjeev. So some words for Mark. No, great, Mark. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for doing this, for keeping this continuity. It's fantastic what you people thought of. And I think it's also grown, and it's going to grow more.
Well, there's always hope and potential for growth. You can see the crazy background that I have. You can see what Viren's gone, which is slightly calmer, but still a lot going on. And then you've got Sanjeev, who's this silent blank canvas. So we all have aspirations, and we're all trying to silence our minds and our environments. So hopefully we should all get there in our own time. But I'm going to conclude tonight's talk with this. And once again, thank you all for being here. We hope to see you very soon. We'll be sharing details of our upcoming talks. Also, I'd like to thank the Matra team, especially Siddhant and Ankit, for all their help with our tech stuff and being a great support system. Thank you guys, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev and Mrinalini.